Chalk Talk is brought to you by Isolite, the emergency lighting experts. Stay educated, my friends.
In learning, you will teach, and in teaching, you will learn. That's a quote by today's artist, Phil Collins. Thank you for joining us for our January Chalk Talk. Welcome to 2024. I'm Western Regional Sales Manager Greg Keel, along with Eastern Regional Sales Manager Matt Bird, and we've got an exciting Chalk Talk today to kick off the year as we announce a new product. As always, our host is our Director of Product Development, Evan Ackman. Evan, take it away.
Thanks, Greg. Did anyone ever notice that like 80s songs in particular don't really say anything? Like In the Air Tonight's not really about anything, and so it can't really end. So they just sort of fade out slowly at the end of the song without having to just like resolve anything. I'm sort of wondering if Chalk Talks would work that way, where I just slowly get softer and softer and then just hang up the call. Probably not, but it's a good song anyway. And thank you all for joining us here on the first Chalk Talk of the year. As Greg mentioned, we're going to be talking about a new product, the Air. It's an architectural emergency light. And I thought before we jumped into the details of that new product, we would just sort of go over what I mean when I say architectural emergency light, really drawing it in contrast to the industrial emergency lights, sort of the differences in construction, the design, and the performance of those devices. So we'll do that as background. Then we'll jump over into the details of the new product. Again, talking about the sleek design, some of the advanced optics that we've built into it, and the simplicity and flexibility that's really embodied in the product line. And then at the end, we'll talk about the ordering guide, the options that are available to you, sort of where it fits in our product lineup so that you understand like when you would use this versus something else. We'll talk about the release schedule, and then, as always, we'll throw up some additional information at the end. As always, it's a Chalk Talk. You guys are muted. Throw your questions in the chat. We'll make sure we get to all of them before we get off of this call. Now, I said we were going to start by trying to distinguish what we mean between industrial and architectural emergency lights. And I think we probably all have an instinct or an intuition about what type of products go into each of these buckets. If I threw something up there, like you see on your screen right now, and said, is the one on the left architectural or is it industrial? You'd say that's pretty industrial. That's very functional, maybe not very form heavy. Similarly, the one on the right, much more form heavy, but still functional. You would do that. And as I go through these a couple items, I want to make it clear that I'm not making a value judgment about which of these two things is better. Obviously, we're talking about an architectural light in this presentation, so we're sort of going to draw the contrast in such a way to highlight why architectural lights fit their applications. But industrial lights certainly have a purpose in the world. We make and sell lots of them. In fact, we have more coming out this year. And so it's not a better versus worse type situation. It's a different applications type situation. So to start, I would like to sort of ignore how they look and really focus on how they're made, the differences in construction and finish between these two different device types. So industrial lights, I think you probably have the intuition that generally these are made of metal. It's something that you could bang a forklift into and maybe not have it break into 1,000 pieces. It's sort of folded sheet metal. Generally, the color on it doesn't really matter. So it's going to be sort of white-ish or maybe doesn't matter-ish. It's just an ugly, large box. It's very functional. But with that functionality, oftentimes comes advantages like the ability to gasket it and seal it for wet locations, to add a heater on the inside of it to account for cold weather applications. That's very unique to the industrial emergency light segment. Now, in contrast, the architectural lights, sometimes these are made of metal. Sometimes we would make them out of die cast, like as would be typical with our concealed emergency lights. But generally, they're going to be made of a thermoplastic. And we're going to take a lot more care and attention to what type of thermoplastic, the texture of it, the colors that we choose. It's going to be a controlled white or black, generally that has like a RAL number or a Pantone number that we would use for consistency. Something that really makes it clear that this is intended for indoor finished spaces. Now, the downside of this is generally these designs aren't compatible with like gasketing or sealing for wet locations. But generally speaking, I think it's true probably for all of our architectural emergency lights. They are capable of being used in damp locations. We treat the inside of the units such that high humidity environments are actually okay. But that's sort of the difference in terms of how they're made, which leads us right over to the most obvious distinction between these two different device types, how they really look on the wall. And the thing that I'll say about the design of the industrial lights is generally they're not as designed. Like I said, the function is going to try to lead form as much as possible. It's intended for industrial spaces. It's not a critical viewing environment. So it's big, ugly lamps on top of big, ugly boxes generally for the industrial products. There are exceptions to that rule, certainly, but just speaking in generalities, it's going to be function before form. However, when you're talking about the architectural products, you really are trying to marry form and function. Obviously, they have to be functional, but because they're going in these interior spaces, form counts. And so we do things like try to make them very sleek and sort of near the wall or ceiling. We have concealed emergency lights. We're trying to hide those lenses. We don't really want big, ugly lamp heads on top of the unit. We'll keep the lenses very small and allow for some flexibility in terms of how they move or potentially focusing them, but trying to hide them a little bit more. The attempt for the architectural emergency lights is to be inconspicuous, right? You don't really want them to stick out on the wall so much. You're trying to hide them as much as possible. And the final main distinction that we're going to cover here today is what I'll just term performance of these devices. And there's a sort of a drastic difference between these two. The industrial lights, generally speaking, just have big traditional lamps hanging off the top. And when you get a very traditional lamp, you get sort of okay performance. It's stuff that will work in every type of application, but it's not great at any of them. That makes sense when you think about these might go into warehouses or storerooms, closets, places where it's not exactly clear what the egress path design is going to be. So that very generic light source is really okay for these types of products. Architectural products, because the understanding is that it's going to go into an interior space, the optics can be designed to be very intentional, right? So a little bit more effective delivery of the lumens. Generally, the design of the product actually drives that. We can't fit as large of batteries, and so we have to make more effective use of the little LEDs that are actually in there. And so we get optimized beam patterns so that we can get long spacing without having to just throw away light up into the air or sort of out into the space where the path of egress isn't defined. And so with those distinctions in mind, it gives me great pleasure to introduce the Air to you. And so here it is, and you're going to start to see some of the things that we were just talking about in terms of that intentional lensing design. The fact that this thing is very sleek and sits very close to the wall. The color and finish of it is much more attractive than a big ugly box. And so I want to just go through this very specifically with the same lens that we use to describe the difference between the two product types. And so we'll start with the design of it. And I really mean design and construction. So I said that when you start talking about architectural lights, the goal is really to make it as unobtrusive as possible. And so this device sits very close to the wall. And in almost all applications, even though you saw the lenses moving, the Air is always going to look like this for 99% of the applications. I'll explain why in a few minutes, but those lenses will always be tucked in. The optics are such that you don't necessarily need to pull out the lenses for a lot of applications. And it comes in those sort of designed black and white finishes. And it's more obvious when you're holding one in your hand. But when you're looking at the Air, like you could see that there's a nice texture on that, the picture of the black one on the left. It has a nice texture. It looks just nice. I think that the design is kind of table stakes for an architectural product, though. I think where this Air really distinguishes itself from all other products in the market is in the optics and the performance. And, we spent an embarrassing amount of time, money, and attention on those little lenses that you see there on the right-hand side. And so for this version, there's 6 in total, 3 on each side. It's really taking that 1680 lumens, which is already a lot, and really trying to direct it in such a way that you get these long, narrow beam patterns that's going to be appropriate for indoor office space. So, a 6-foot wide path. And what that optical design has allowed us to do is get a product that's capable of being mounted up to 28 feet high, which is effectively 1,000,000 feet in the air for an indoor finished space, with spacings of 121 feet. So what that means is it's a lot of light. And pragmatically, I mean, maybe stupidly for us, you don't actually need a lot of these to become the solution for emergency lighting in your building. And so that's what really differentiates this product from some of the other ones. That performance, like, just can't be beat. It is the highest performing architectural emergency light that we've ever made, certainly, and probably the most in the industry. Now, I can't claim to speak for everybody at Isolite, but I can certainly speak from my perspective. And I'm of the opinion that more options is actually a detriment to a product. I think that we need to design simple products that have relatively few options, but that means that the flexibility really needs to be baked in to the base version of the product. And so we've done that here. So there's a couple things that I want to highlight right now. From the design perspective, you saw in the animation that these lenses, or these lamp heads, we'll call them, actually move in 2 different directions. So I'm going to struggle to draw this, but they fold sort of out to the side, which helps aim these lenses straight down. That's to account for those maximum, like, 28-foot mounting heights, so that you can get light directly under the air. And then when you're trying to twist it forward so that it's out perpendicular to the wall, that's to allow it to light up spaces that are sort of out in front of the unit rather than just a long hallway. So if you're if you're putting this thing in a big open office space and you're trying to light up, aisles down a cube, you can actually do that by twisting those lenses out forward. So a lot of different applications covered by the same unit, just with some cute twisting of those lamp heads. Again, 99% of the applications will have everything all tucked in and they don't stick out at all. It's there for flexibility of application. And the other thing that comes up for indoor architectural emergency lights is, remote capacity. And in a lot of our lights, we offer a little bit of remote capacity, and this is no different. But instead of forcing you to add that option at order time and know that there's one version of this product that's a little bit different, this unit will actually automatically detect the presence of remote lamp heads and reduce its output power on the local lamps, and then provide remote capacity. And then the self-diagnostics and everything takes into account the remote lamp heads that are actually installed. So, it's just trying to be smarter. So the leads for the remote lamps are just always there. And then that flexibility, or maybe that simplicity, is really reflected in the ordering nomenclature that you're going to see when you go look at the cut sheet. There's really 4 units. There's black and white. There's a 9-watt with a single lens like you see in the upper right there, and a 16-watt or 10-watt with remote capacity, both the same unit. You order them the same. It's really those 4 options. Now, self-diagnostics is baked into every unit. That can be defeated. You can do that in the field, or we can do that for you at the factory. So it's sort of a fake option, let's say. It's really a convenience because you could do it in the field. The flexibility is shipped when in the unit. And the same is true for the 15-minute time delay. We could pre-configure that for you at the factory. It can also be done in the field after the fact. So the basic is that there's 4 of these things. That number sort of expands a little bit when you talk about those convenience options that we offer from the factory for you. Now, I think it's helpful to understand where this fits. And this is not just an excuse for me to use the word bestest, which I think is really fun. There's really a distinction between a traditional type emergency light, something that's kind of self-contained, mounts on the wall to a junction box, to the what we will call the bestest for right now, concealed emergency lights that have a little bit more installation associated with them. You have to get that rough-in box in, and then you stuff everything in the wall, and then the light gets concealed. They're sort of a different animal. And so how I think of the Air is really, it brings the the superior performance of the concealed emergency light line into a more traditional form factor that mounts on a junction box on the wall. And so there's some niceness there. If the walls are finished, it's air. If you really want something that's going to totally disappear, can be concealed, that's when you're going to jump up to the concealed emergency lights like the MIGN2, like the LMIGN, LTP, GNSD, all of those particular products. And so this sort of is the top of the line conventional style architectural emergency light. That's how it fits in the line from my perspective, and hopefully yours as well. These products will be shipping March 1st. In reality, it's probably going to be a little bit earlier than that. March 1st is just a nice round date that I could give you. So if you placed an order here in the next couple of weeks, you're probably going to see an ESD of likely the 4th, the week of the 4th. We anticipate beating that unless we have a crazy run on these things at the start. So hopefully that happens and the ESDs stay at March 4th, but we are getting ready to build these things right now. So we are good to go. This is not a long future type item. With that said, this slide was actually written before I gave the presentation. So I wrote these slides a couple weeks ago. I mentioned here that all this stuff about the Air is going to be available on the website February 1st. That's actually January 25th. It's all up as of right now. So the spec sheets, the installation guides, a bunch of IES files. There's files for the 9-watt and 16-watt, as well as IES files for the 16-watt with the diminished output because remote capacity is being used. So you could put these in your designs and see what the difference is between those various products and really just see for yourself how performant those optics really are. As a follow-up to this, of course, you're going to get the traditional things, a video link of me giving the presentation so you can see my annotations, the slides themselves so that you can give this presentation or reference it. And instead of doing a pricing addendum like we typically do for new products, or at least we did all last year, we're going to be issuing an entirely new price guide in the next couple weeks that will have this and at least one other new product in it that we've not announced yet that we're going to announce at the February Chalk Talk. So you sleuths out there, when you go look at that new price guide, you'll see maybe a product that we've not really announced yet. So that's pretty exciting too. That'll come out here in the next couple days. There's not really a lot of price increases. It's just an opportunity for us to get all of the addendums that we've filed over the last year into one price guide and get something with a nice 2024 date on it so that you're not using the 2022 version of the price book. It's been a while since I've given a Chalk Talk. It's good to be back. I appreciate your guys' attention. As always, I'm Evan Ackman. Greg did that fantastic introduction for us at the beginning, and Matt's on the line as well. If there's anything that we can do for you guys, whether it be about the Air or anything else that we do, please don't hesitate to reach out. We appreciate everything you do for us. So anything we can do to support you, we are 100% in for.